Sarah. Thank you.
Hi, Megan. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. It's a beautiful sunny day. It feels like spring is here finally.
Yes, lovely. Well, we just discussed briefly there, but I'm in Dubai, so it's getting ridiculously hot here. So I'm actually
Mm.
looking forward to getting back to some of the lovely, fresh British air soon. But thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. I am super excited to have this conversation with you. I'm really keen to talk about your position at RedStart and the work that RedStart do, and we'll talk a little bit more about RedStart in a second, but also really your personal journey to get to where you've got to, why you do the work that you do, and really delve into that and understand what's driven you to get there and what keeps driving you to keep doing the work you do, because it's not always easy, as I'm sure we'll talk about. So yes, a massive thank you for your time. Really appreciate it and super excited to get into it.
Thank you
So
for inviting me.
you're very welcome. So, in terms of your journey, then, if we start there and then we can kind of delve into Red Start and the fantastic work that you guys do. You tell me about your journey. What led you to where you are today to become the CEO of Red Start Educate?
So, my first connection with Red Start was when I was working as a global head of client service at an asset management company called Insight Investment. And we were struggling to find things that people would do to use their volunteer days. And there were a couple of options that we managed to source, one of which was Red Start. And I started as a volunteer, effectively. Then from there, when I left Insight, I was looking for what my next thing was going to be, and as it happened, the person who, Kate Jones, who happened to be the chair of Red Start at the time, had been a former colleague of mine at Insight, and so she was like, well, if you're kind of looking for things to do, why don't you come and help out here for a bit? I did, and then one thing led to another, and about a year later, I was offered the opportunity to become the CEO. And I talked to the board at that point about what I thought the strategy should be, because I had had the benefit of sitting in a number of seats. I'd been a volunteer. I'd done some work for Kate in sort of fundraising and development strategy, that kind of work. And so actually that had given me a really helpful view from a number of points, listening to teachers and funders and various other people involved. And what I felt was we had a really good product with one workshop that we were at that time delivering to anyone that wanted it, for children from 8 years old to 13 years old. So 1 minute we would be in St Paul's School, and the next minute we'd be in Tower Hamlets, and 1 minute we'd be at the top end of primary, and the next minute at the lower end of secondary. And whilst I could see that the children were getting something from it, I was really struggling to convince myself that one session of 4 hours, no matter how good it was going to really change the way the children were behaving. So we had a conversation, and the board were very supportive. They were like, well, okay, if you think we need to do something different, go away and come back with a strategy to us in a month. So I worked with the team on ideas that we had, and then we went back with the strategy that is now the Change the Game strategy, which is the strategy we've been deploying for 3 years now in schools, and we'll be coming into the 4th year next academic year. And as far as my own sort of passion for financial education is concerned, I think, to be honest, it's really grown as I've got older. I think when I was younger, I always felt that I've always been really hardworking and connected with work, and I always felt that whatever happened, I could dig myself out of a hole by just working, basically. More jobs, longer hours, whatever, you know what I mean. And that was kind of my financial strategy, if I'm honest. I didn't really know what I was doing at all. I didn't really have an investment strategy or anything else. I just knew it was a good idea not to regularly spend more than I was earning. And as a backup, if I needed it, I might have to work harder. That was kind of it. Well, as I began to come towards the end of my career, and then you start to think about, well, okay, that might work while you're younger and fit and healthy and all the rest of it. But all of a sudden you start to face the next phase of your life, which is the phase where you're not necessarily working in the same way and earning the same amount of money. And you have to start thinking about, what does that look like? And all of a sudden, as I started thinking about it and my life and what I'd done, I really began to realise that I was a lot worse off financially than I probably should and could have been, mostly because I really didn't have a clue what I was doing at any stage. And I thought, you know, if that's how I feel now, that a lot of the guardrails that have been there for the last couple of generations have fallen away. And by guardrails, I mean things like DB pensions, the state pension, all of this stuff is disappearing, stroke has disappeared. And I began to think, well, you know, now we've got a generation growing up who also have had no education and are not being made aware of what good looks like, don't know how much money in a pot at age 40 is about right if you want an income of 30,000 a year when you retire, and if you want to retire at 70 or something. This isn't good enough. It's like we're heading for a disaster here, and a society where elderly folk are going to end up not being able to live effectively, particularly as we've also got a situation where more and more people are living permanently in private rented accommodation. And again, that's one thing to do and to cope with when you are working and you are fit and you're able. But to live like that and to live in that situation, rather, in those circumstances when you are older and you've got the stress of potentially being given notice on where you live and told to move in a month, or the rent going up, or whatever it might be, it's just a nightmare scenario brewing. And that really got me worked up about it, in the sense of looking at my own family and the children in my family and what they're going to emerge into as a society is not what I want. And so although this is only a small piece of it, and I'm not suggesting this fixes all of society's ills, but it is definitely the case that, in my mind, that education and information give people optionality. You know, then it's their choice as to whether or not they want to follow a certain path. But if you don't even tell them what that path looks like in the first place, you're not even giving them a chance. And it became clear as I started researching it that the place where the harder to reach children and families were in the poorer parts of society. And as society is changing, as technology is coming in more and more, they're also facing challenges around things like financial inclusion. Many of the families we work with are unbanked, and that's becoming a bigger and bigger problem because cash is harder and harder to work with now. And it got me thinking about, why is that? You know, why are they unbanked? And a lot of that, from the conversations I've had, is about trust and understanding what protections you have and what happens to your information when you give it to a bank. And all of these things combined, I suppose, started me down this path, really.
Do you think that because you worked in finance before you then took on the role in RedStart, and you obviously experienced RedStart originally from being a volunteer yourself, so going in and supporting children, do you think it was that drive from learning a bit about finance yourself through the work that you did there that kind of led you here as well? Just to give a bit of context, that I feel I'm really passionate about similar topics to you, because I walked into finance just coincidentally at the age of 21. I happened to get a job at Standard Life because my friend said they're hiring, and I went along and it kind of all happened. And then I realised there's all this information that I had not been privy to or been told about at all. I just happened to find a job in finance.
Yes, I think there's an element of that for sure. Like the terminology and things, when I first began working there, I had no clue what all these words even meant. I didn't know what LDI was, what's liability-driven investment. I didn't know what the difference was between different types of pension schemes. I had no clue. And so, yes, I think the fact that it became obvious that there was this different language that people were talking, which I didn't understand, and once you became aware of it and the difference it makes as to whether you're in this scheme or that scheme, and was being removed when the defined benefit schemes were being closed down. I'm certain that the reason there wasn't more of an outcry about all that was because most people did not understand what they were losing. Because really, it should not have been possible for those benefits to have been removed as easily as they were without there being a bigger reaction to it. But they were able to do it because people didn't understand. And it's only now that as people who are now probably in their 50s, maybe early 50s, come through to retirement and start to realise that their situation is going to be very different to their parents, and that their pension scheme, even within the same organisation, the civil service, for example, or a private company, it may be a pension with the same company name attached to it, but it's not the same pension. I don't think, well, I think a lot of people just have no idea that that's the case.
Yeah.
So I think there was definitely a feeling that these things are happening, and the management of your money makes such a big difference to your life. And also I think what had happened as well is that within my own family, there had been people who've been in different situations during the course of my life, and money had been a factor in several of them, you know, where I have seen the stress that it puts on people when they are not managing their money well, and the ill health that it causes when people are worried all the time about money.
Yep. It's
a horrible situation to be in, because it's literally there with you the minute you open your eyes in the morning and the minute you shut and right until you shut them at night, because money is so interconnected with everything in life, isn't it? You know, whether you take the bus or the train, or you have to walk, or whether you're going to pack a sandwich or buy something on the way, a coffee or not, you know, all these decisions are connected with money and your budget and the way you live. It's all intertwined. And I think the rise of social media and watching the children in my family grow up being more and more connected with people who are showing them what wonderful things you can buy with money, and how good it is, what a great thing it is to have a flashy car, or, you know, to be at this place, or have this bag, or whatever, also made me think this is not, there's no balance to it. You're only being shown one side of the story. That's the issue I've got with it. It's like that's all that's being publicised, is one way of living, and you're only seeing the front end of that, aren't
the good
you?
bits. Yeah.
The good bits, yeah, exactly.
And are these fancy cars actually bought outright, or are they on finance? Are they owned? There's so
Exactly.
much of a push on social media to have money and be rich, and actually money's way more than just that, to your point. In my opinion, it's a very, very emotive topic that has an influence on so many other parts of your life. Yeah.
Yes, and I would so much rather that we focused on wealth and what wealth means as a word, rather than money, because it isn't, you know, one of the things we try to talk to the children about is that one of the decisions they will have to make is the way in which they want to live their lives. And actually, your happiness is a hugely valuable commodity. And you may find that access to that is going to come at a cheaper price than you think. It may not require a £4,000 Chanel bag every month for you to be happy, actually. And I think that's the balance that's missing in a lot of the conversation, to be honest.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yes, I could talk about that a lot. Money and freedom, and the ability to make decisions, and it buys you time if you work with money correctly, not just things. And I think that's really important. So let's talk about RedStart in a bit more detail, because we've talked about your journey to where you are now, to CEO of RedStart. So if you can give a short summary for those that don't know who are listening to this, of who RedStart Educate are and what they do.
Thank you. So yes, we are a financial education charity and a social mobility charity. So we work with primary school children only, and only those children who are in schools that serve communities of greater disadvantage across 7 hubs in England, Scotland and Wales. We started the strategy that we are working on now 3 years ago, coming up to the end of our 3rd year, and we are We see the same children every year from reception right through to year 6 or P1 to P7 in Scotland. And the reason that's important is it's all based on the pedagogy of little and often at this age group rather than bigger slugs of time. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that younger children will both learn and retain information if it's delivered in smaller bite-sized pieces but repeated over time. And that's what the whole programme is based on, really. So there's a whole ladder of learning right from reception through to year 6. And the aim of it all is to create an understanding of what good habits look like and the basic rules, if you like, that will keep you pretty much on the right track, to build a confidence with some of the terms so that the whole industry doesn't feel as overwhelming, and so that the children feel engaged with it and feel that it's accessible, to connect them with the idea of having a bank account and using a bank account, because that may be something for the children we work with that they may not be familiar with. And also to think about not only what you do with money when you've got it, but how are you going to live your life? So what, at some point further down the road, you will have some decisions to make. As these children grow up, it's likely they're going to have some sort of portfolio career. So being flexible, being able to be flexible, being able to be resilient, having money available to you will give you that optionality and that choice when those moments come. And think about what type of work it is that you would like to do that fits your personality set and your skill set. So this isn't so much about qualifications, it's more about the fact that, because these obviously are quite little children, talking to them about the fact that every personality has qualities within it where if you lean into those, you're likely to be happier and more successful in the job you're doing. So if your job contains 75 to 80% of the time the things that give you energy rather than the things that drain you, you are going to be likely to be happier and more successful. So we talk about that, and also the other things that work gives you. So not just money, but also, you know, connections with other people and the ability to learn and to try and to do all sorts of other things that are good for you, that are not, and that are, give you options to become the person you want to be, effectively. And if that is for you, you know, you decide that what you want to do is stay in the town that you're in and have a job there, then that's absolutely fine. But think about what that looks like if that's your choice, because the world is changing fast and you need to be prepared for the fact that you may very well end up with multiple different jobs. They reckon that something like 25% of the jobs that exist at the moment will not exist in 10 years' time,
Yep.
which is quite scary, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and I think it's gonna move faster and faster. I think it's super interesting. I love that in terms of supporting kids to think about jobs that give them energy and where 80% of the work they do is actually something they really enjoy. I find that so kind of refreshing. That's one of the reasons for this podcast, is that I believe that if you do work that you enjoy, you'll be so much more successful. If you do work that you're passionate about, as you're clearly very passionate about in terms of educating children about wealth and finances and work, you will be more successful because you're leaning into the things that really get you excited, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. And your point that, so I always thought of RedSTART as focused on how to support children with understanding finances and budgeting, and I've volunteered with you guys a couple of times, and it's been great to work with the kids to help them understand the value of money and simple topics like spending and saving and even tax, actually, which was a tricky one, but really, really great. But I love that you're talking there about, you're not just talking to them about money and what we think of as money and wealth and like spending and investing and saving. It's actually more about the work and the lifestyle that is linked to that money as well. So that's super interesting. Have you got any examples or kind of case studies or what's come out the back of some of the work that RedStart have done in these schools with children?
Yeah, do you know, some of the loveliest things have been the unexpected emails and things that we've had, or conversations with teachers. We've obviously commissioned the Policy Institute at King's College in London to carry out a randomised control trial. So they are following a subset of about 6,000 of our children as they move through school. So there is official feedback which comes every year from their study, which shows the difference between the treatment children and the control children. So treatment children in the treatment schools get everything I've described, and there's a money management app that we put into school as well. Control children, children in the control schools, are not told to do nothing. They're told to do whatever they would ordinarily do in that school if RedStart didn't exist. So they then, Kings, compare the outcomes every year of the children as they grow up, ask them exactly the same questions, and then assess whether the children that are in the RedStart programme have a greater sort of financial knowledge, competence, understanding, a better kind of more positive future view of their lives, that kind of thing. And they produce a report on that. And at the end of last year, that showed that there was a positive medium-sized impact on the treatment children versus the control children. So that's really, in particular, on financial knowledge and financial ability. And that's not surprising, because those are the things that probably will move first. The more attitudinal things are going to likely follow, I think. So we've got that going on, but then also there have been some instances where we've had emails from parents randomly. So there was one quite recently, back end of last year, where a parent contacted us to say that their child had been in our workshops and was in, I think, the second year of the programme at that point. And they said she is asking us to open an account for her because she wants to save money. I don't know how to do that. Can you help me? So what I loved about that is, first of all, she's paid attention in the workshop and it's resonated with her. Second of all, she's gone home and has carried that conversation on in the house with her parents. And third of all, it's prompted her parents to actually do something about it. And who knows, for that little girl, maybe that will make a difference to her and cause her to start to structure things in a way and send her off down a path that she would not have otherwise gone down.
Yeah.
That's one example of the sort of thing that we've seen, which is lovely when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful. So let's talk about then, because I'm interested. I've not got children, so I don't know what the kind of the setup of the schooling system is currently in the UK in terms of financial education. So if we can talk a little bit about the schools that you guys go into and support, aside from the work that RedStart does, what is the expectation on schools across the UK, and that might be different depending on Scotland, England, Wales, in terms of financial education for children? It feels like a massive gap to me that that RedStart has to go in and do that, but I don't know if that's just what the reason is for that. If it's just the curriculum has not evolved, or there's just not capacity. It'd be really good to understand your views on that and the schools you work with.
Yes. So in Scotland and Wales, the situation is a little bit different to the situation in England. So in Scotland and Wales, it is on the curriculum for both primary and secondary kids. But and that's in a way part of the problem, because the governments have concluded, therefore, that the job is done and that, it's now sorted. But actually, it isn't happening, because it's not resulting in a consistent level of high quality financial education being given to every child across Scotland and Wales in primary school. It still isn't. Or secondary, actually, but we're focusing on primary. And the reason it isn't is that the curriculum exists and explains very clearly what it is you're supposed to be doing. And then there are links that are provided to very comprehensive documents that describe a set of guidelines about how you go about doing this, and to some documents you can download from a portal that will allow you to build your own lesson plans and create the lessons and activities for the children. Now, that's all well and good, but the problem is that, particularly in the sort of schools we are working in, the teachers do not have time to go and do all that work. They just simply don't. They are caught up with so many other things going on in school. They're dealing with a lot of societal issues at schools as well as the learning aspect of things. And if it's not made very, very easy for them and very straightforward, it's going to go on the I can't get to that now list because I've got other bigger priorities that are more immediate. And so the gap that RedStart is filling is not that the teachers don't want to do it. We've never come across a teacher yet that doesn't think it's good for children to be taught about financial education. But the issue is that most of them have not been taught about how to teach it, and a lot of them are not confident themselves about financial education and how to make that interesting to a primary school child. And they are in very busy, demanding jobs where their lesson planning time for the week works out to give them something like 4 minutes per lesson to plan. So in your 4 minutes, you are not going to have time to look at the guidelines, read all of that, download the things from the portal, go through it all, figure out, get your resources, make some things yourself, and go and trial it in your classroom. You're just not going to do it.
No.
So the thing that RedStart is doing is there's two key things, really. We're providing the kit bags that have got all the resources in them that you need for every year group. Those get delivered to the school when they become member schools. And then in the first year, we spend quite a bit of time in school with the school, helping them to get it set up. So sometimes we lead the workshops and the teachers are there watching first of all. Sometimes we team teach them. Sometimes they will lead and we will just be there to support first of all. So there are a variety of ways we can do it depending on the individual. That varies by class and school by school. But the key thing is they don't have to think about it. All they have to do is take the lesson plans, take the kit bag, go into the classroom and run the program. And there's a video they can watch beforehand, which is about 20 minutes long, which they can watch, in the evening or at lunchtime, that shows them how to organise it, and is honestly what has made the difference. And this year, we've got 93 member schools, and as it looks at the moment, our applications are coming in right now for next year. It looks as though we'll have about 150 member schools next year. So, and most of that growth is organic. Most of it has come from teachers telling other teachers about it, or teachers moving school and then contacting us from the new school and saying, we need to have this here. Teachers getting promoted to be a head teacher and then coming back and saying, I want this in my school. And that's, in a way, the nicest part of the story, I think, because there's no better advertisement for what we're doing and the value. Teachers are so busy and the curriculum is so full, they would not want to do something that they did not see value in. Do you know what I mean? Because all of the schools that join have to become members, and that means they have to sign an agreement that that lays out what we will do for them and what they will do for us. And on the what they will do for us bit, this is a long-term program, so they're signing up to say, we are going to embed this, we're going to run it, we're going to do it properly. We're not going to dip in and out. We're going to take it on, as it were. And so far, as I say, that's working well. And next year, it looks as though we will go from 93 to 150 schools, which is great.
You need the resources to do it, and the volunteers, and then the support for the teachers, I guess. In terms of the schools that you guys support, you said obviously it is on the curriculum in Scotland and Wales. So does that mean that there will be some schools that are trying to implement it? And how do you guys decide what schools to work with? Or is it anyone that asks for the help kind of you work with?
So some of the schools that we work in have been doing some sort of financial education before, but not in as comprehensive a way, generally speaking. And that's why they are keen to have the programme. In terms of the schools we work with, to be eligible, they have to be level 5 or below on the index of multiple deprivation. So they have to be at that level and below, and they have to be within travelling distance of one of the hubs that we've got at the moment in across the country. We are looking at expanding those hubs, and we do have some areas, some little groups that we work with who are satellites, if you like. So if we're in that situation, what we need is a group of schools together where we can go out to that area and do our work there over a couple of days and then come back again. Rather, it's not efficient for us to be going here, there and everywhere for one school. So they need, if they want to join and they're not in an actual hub area, then the satellite needs to consist of at least 6 schools so that we can make it worth our while going out there to look after them.
Yeah. Fab. And just one other question I was thinking of when you mentioned about high quality financial education. Is there something that kind of defines that, where you can kind of gauge, or a school can gauge that they're actually doing something that's at a certain level that's going to actually have an impact on a child?
Yeah, well, our resources were all accredited by the Young Enterprise Assessment, which is something that is available for anyone that produces resources to get an independent accreditation. So we did have that. But I would say the main evidence, I suppose, of the value of it and the quality of it is the outcomes that we're seeing in the children. And alongside the work that King's are doing and the feedback from parents and so on, we also are getting teachers now, because we're in the 3rd year now, we're beginning to get teachers saying that they recognise a real difference in the children. So if you taught in, let's say, Year 5, P6, you would now be seeing children coming into your classroom who've had 2 years previously of RedSTART workshops. And those teachers are now saying, the kids that are coming in this year, I can see the difference in the way they talk about money, what they know about money, the way they think about saving and budgeting and all that. I can really see the way in which their thinking is maturing, and I can see the impact that it's having versus the children that I had 2 years ago who had had nothing at that point. So I think those outcomes alongside the more academic ones that are being measured by King's are probably the real evidence of it working. And as I said to you, you know, the fact that we've got teachers who are moving schools, who are going into a brand new school where they might have a brand new boss or a bunch of new teachers they're trying to bring on board, and they're coming to us and saying, come in and bring this programme in. I want the children here to benefit from it in the same way as I saw the previous school benefit. That, to me, is the greatest recognition of all, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just then on England, so what's the situation in England then?
Well, England is a bit of a conundrum, because the problem is in England that we have a curriculum, but we also have a structure where there are now more schools that are not state schools, i.e. they're not aligned directly with the curriculum, than there are state schools that are directly. So we've got academy trusts, independent schools, a whole range of different structures. And although the curriculum does recommend that there is some element of financial education included in maths, effectively, what isn't very clear is exactly what's meant to be delivered. It's not compulsory, and it's also not as well laid out as it is within the Scottish and Welsh curriculum, where it's very clear how it fits and where it should be delivered and all the rest of it. So it is in there, but it's not compulsory in England, and it's not as well defined as it is in the other nations. And so one of the things that we are trying to achieve is to get that changed, and to get the curriculum to be clearer about what is actually required. And a big part of that is also about then having it measured. So the thing that schools respond to is also reward and recognition, obviously. And if Ofsted is going into schools and is assessing the way in which schools are delivering their financial education as part of their work, then that will also encourage schools to actually deliver a proper programme of education around money, because it's not on the curriculum, as in it's not compulsory in England. And we've had Ofsted inspections in English schools where they have actually called out the programme and commented on the fact that they have spoken to children at all different age groups in school, and they've been impressed by how much knowledge there is around money and what they should be doing with their money, and they've complimented the school on that. So it resulted in 2 of our schools had higher great ratings in their PSHE area as a result of that assessment. So that also is an important aspect of it. If it were to be, there's a curriculum review going on at the moment led by Becky Francis, who they produced their summary report about a month ago, and the final report's due out in the autumn. There wasn't anything really about primary in the summary report, although there was reference to financial education needing to be a bigger part of education overall, and creating more life skills within school and different pathways for children, so that it's not just all about it being a funnel for university, but actually being about preparing children for life, which I totally agree with. I think some of that was exactly right. So when the final report comes out in the autumn, it'll be interesting to see what that looks like and what direction that's going to take the schools in England, effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're right. You kind of, as much as it shouldn't necessarily always be this way, you need to measure things if you want them to be successful or be implemented, right? That's if that's how they're measured. So, yeah,
Yes.
that would be great to see that. And if you think about the point of preparing children for life and not just university, and the world that they're going to be graduating into from primary into high school into life, and in the technological ecosystem that now exists in terms of work and life, you just think it's bonkers that you wouldn't have financial education at the core of that, in terms of how they, but although I've thought that even from when I was at school, right, it's just bonkers that I came out of school and didn't know some of this fundamental stuff. So yeah, let's hope that something comes out of that. In terms of the government then, so let's talk about government first. What would be a kind of game changer for you, or an ask from you at RedStart, to really start to make a difference in this space and have a true impact on the financial education system for children now and into the future? Is there something that you think could be done by government if they were to take it seriously, that would really, really make a difference?
Yes, I think, first of all, that clarity about exactly what's expected to be delivered in schools is needed in England in particular, and how that's going to be measured. I think that's really important. But then I think the other thing is, I don't think it's necessarily the case that you need a one-size-fits-all programme. So RedStart has been designed for the schools in which we work. It may well be that if you are working with schools that are better resourced and serving communities that are wealthier, that you don't need the same level of intervention as we are providing. And I fully accept that. And so I think what the government needs to do, if they're taking it seriously, is they need to produce a dashboard of a pre-selected handful of options that lay out very clearly the differences between them. And so it would say, RedStarts would be, is this supported in school? Is this teacher-led, or do you get physical support? Are the resources provided? What sort of amount of time per year do you have to give to this? So that a teacher can compare them, like on a table, and find the one that works best for their school, and pick that one, and then there's an email address, and they contact the provider and sort it out. That would make a huge difference, because as I was saying to you, schools and teachers are time poor, and even if wants to approach somebody, if they just Google financial education in schools or something, there's hundreds of people that are providing in some shape or form. And if you go onto the accredited list of of options, of resources available. There's so many on there. There's no way that they are going to be able to tell the difference between one and another, and they haven't got time to go scrutinising it all. A really, really helpful thing would be to do that work for them and say, any one of these 5 work, we're happy with all of them. Find the one that best fits your school. And then obviously the question is funding, because all of this does cost money. But doing nothing is also not a free lunch, because the number of people who, as a result of poor financial management, end up in a declining spiral of poor mental health and lack of contribution, not being able to work and all the rest of that, also costs a huge amount of money. It's just hidden, that's all. So the other thing that we are planning to do, so we've got this impact study up and running, and we're moving on to scaling, proving scaling and appetite, which is what we're doing now, and influencing policy, which is where we're having conversations with the MPs and the MSPs and the MSs to talk about what we can do within the regions to try and get, some momentum going. But also, we also need to make sure that at the end of all of this, there is funding available to support it in some shape or form. And a social return on investment report that lays out at the back end of it, okay, so if we do nothing, these are the percentage of people who currently end up going off the rails for whatever reason and having to be supported. And that's what that costs, the NHS benefits and all the rest of it. If we look at the children that have been following this programme for the last however many, 7 years at that point, let's say, and we look at the way in which they're thinking and behaving and the difference that's made, there will be some assumptions, and they will have to be assumptions at that point, but there will be some assumptions that they can make about the extent to which that might mean that they avoid going down that other track. And that we will be able to put a pound note cost attached to that. Yeah, we will. So I think that's really important. And there's a scheme that was set up by the Conservative government a few years ago, which essentially a decision was made that it was really important for all primary school children to be taught PE. And so, fine, except that in primary school, the teacher teaches everything that's taught. There was a reaction to that, which was, well, the teachers were saying, well, that's great, but I'm not a PE teacher. I don't know how to teach PE. So what the government did was they set aside several tens of millions of pounds in a grant, essentially, which sat and sits still in the government. I think it's called Primary Premium, something like that. And any school that has a teacher that needs support with teaching primary school children PE can apply for a grant from this fund, and that money will go towards an external provider coming in and helping that teacher to learn how to teach PE to primary school kids. A lot of the people that end up doing it are some of the foundations attached to things like Premier League football clubs and people like that, where there are obviously a lot of people used to teaching kids PE. So if we think teaching PE to primary school children is so important that and I'm not saying it isn't, but if we think that that is so important that we think it's worth setting aside tens of millions of pounds to pay for teachers to be supported to learn how to do it, then shouldn't we at least think financial education is as important as PE? I would say so. And the money was found for that, and it still is found for it. So my argument is, why don't we have something similar that allows for the fact that not every teacher will always need the support, but where they do, there is a fund that the school can access that will allow them to then pay the provider to come in and help them for the first year, which is how it works with RedSTART, come in for the first year and help them get up on their feet with it, and then they should be fine from there on in.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is probably the best answer to it, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, because you go in, right, and as we've discussed, you train the teachers, so then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yes,
right? It
yes,
will then um, follow through. So it would be both a framework for schools to engage with to understand where to go for good financial education, as well as money from the government to fund that kind of transition
yes,
of training to teachers in terms of financial education.
yes.
So that's super clear. In terms of how that works today, how do you guys get funded today to go into schools? I know you obviously rely on a lot of volunteers to help implement
Do.
the training in the schools from a lot of financial services organisations and others. But in terms of the relationship with the schools and how you get in, how that's funded, how does that work at the moment?
So the funding comes from corporates, from trust grants, foundations, that sort of thing. And that money is what we use currently. There's no government funding for any of this at the moment, no.
Interesting, right? Okay. So it's basically corporates funding and then providing their resources in human form to help.
Yes. And the way I feel about that is I think people would be very uncomfortable if we were saying to schools, you know what, we know that learning to read is really important, but we don't think we should be paying for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to get publishers to fund charities to come in and teach your children how to read, because they are the ultimate beneficiaries, so they should teach the children how to read. They should pay for it. That's exactly what's happening right now with financial education. We are saying, we think it's important, we think it's a great idea, but we're not going to put any money behind it. However, how about all of the financial services industry, who are seen as the beneficiaries from this, pay for children to be taught how to manage their money? And it's totally illogical from my point of view. I just don't. Everyone would completely be up in arms if it was suggested we did that with reading. And yet that's exactly what's happening with money right now.
Yeah. But it's also to our earlier conversation, it's not just the financial services industry that benefits from people knowing about money. It's the whole
No,
economy. Like
it isn't.
it's the health service. It's the
It is.
the workforce generation that comes from understanding money. It's bonkers to think like that. But yes. Yeah, really interesting. Okay, so that's where we need the government to kind of step up, I guess, in terms of both funding and frameworks to really support this. And that would be, I think it sounds like there's a little bit more happening in Scotland and Wales in terms of support.
Yes.
Embedding financial education in the curriculum there, and potentially a bit further to go with England and Westminster by the sounds of it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we need the government to do ideally. In an ideal world, if they could pay some more attention to this. In terms of if a parent was watching this, is there anything you would recommend they consider with in terms of how they support their children with financial education? So they might be at a school where it is being taught in the curriculum, might be at a school where RedSTART is in there helping support their children. But is there anything they can do at home from your perspective, a simple thing maybe to help their children with financial education?
I think the simplest thing is to talk about money at home with the children, to be honest, because it's becoming more and more invisible. I mean, I was in school not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about where money is kept, and one child said, on your phone. Because from their point of view, that's where it looks like it is. They know that that's what their parent uses to pay for stuff. So it's becoming less and less of a tangible thing. And I think it's therefore even more important for parents to explain to children about the link between their phone and paying for something and where that money actually has come from, because they're not going to see it in the way they used to. You know, they used to take their dinner money in. They don't do that anymore. The schools all have card systems now. So there's no physical money coming into school. The handling of coins is kind of going, obviously. And so I think that's one of the biggest. Whenever you're in a shop or you're buying anything, whether even online, it's a really good idea to talk to them about what's actually going on so they understand the links between it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd never thought of that. I always, when I was a kid, I got my £5 pocket money and my pound coins, and you'd budget that, and you'd think about how many sweeties I could buy, but I suppose that doesn't exist anymore because you just tap, which is actually also builds into the consumer economy that exists. People just buying stuff so easily, not actually thinking about the consequences of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes it much harder to budget in a sense because your awareness of what's happening is less. It's much easier to overspend now than when you used to go and get, I don't know, £200 out of the bank on a Friday that had to last you a week. Well, then you knew by looking in your purse or in your pocket, you knew how much you had left. You knew, oh, God, it's Wednesday and I've got 50 quid left or something, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's not, it's so much easier to just keep going and then suddenly realise that you're at naught
Yeah.
and you've still got 3 days left before you get paid again or something.
Or minus, just
Or
straight into
minus,
the overdraft.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that for me that seems an exciting place as well for financial services organisations or fintechs to play into the future. There just seems like an opportunity there in terms of engaging younger people in their money in a way that is helpful to them in terms of pots and managing money. I know it's a lot of them are looking at this and grappling with this, but there has to be a way for us to kind of think about how we use technology for good in that sense. Like how I'm thinking about like my pound coins, and I could do that. There must be a way we can do that for children, just in a different way through technology.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a factor. And the other thing I think is having your spend now money, your save for the short term money, and your save for the long term money. Once you fill the first bucket up to move on to the next one and the next one, that no matter how little is in that last bucket, because of the length of time that you're saving for, for a pension or when in your old age, actually even a very small amount can grow to something much bigger over time. And helping them to understand that and think of it in that way is another thing that can really help with. Because in primary school, the biggest influence is still in the home. It's once they move to secondary that it starts to be their peers. And so the more you can drive home some good, strong muscle memory behaviours, the better that they're going to be able to withstand the pressures when they get to secondary school.
Yeah. Yeah, fab. Okay, if we could just quickly talk a little bit about collaboration then, because we've talked about governments, we've talked about financial institutions and financial services companies, as well as a little bit about parents there and the schools themselves. What, through the work you've done with RedSTART, have you learned about kind of cross-sector collaboration and partnerships? What would be a kind of one of your biggest learnings as you've kind of grown and rolled through RedSTART in this space?
Do you mean between charities within the financial services sector?
Yeah, so
between financial education charities.
Optimise that kind of cross-sector opportunity between government and corporate. Like what's the best way to kind of optimise those relationships and have an impact through cross-sector collaboration?
Do you know, it's actually it's more difficult than I thought it was going to be, if I'm honest. And the thing that often gets in the way is money and the way that we are funded. Mm-hmm. As financial education charities, myself and my colleagues that are in this space get along actually really well together. But at the end of the day, we will have to pitch against each other when we go in for funding. And that obviously creates a barrier in the end. There is, though, there is a group, the Youth Financial Capability Group it's called, where we do come together and discuss what's going on in the sector. And we do share connections. And I, for example, because I only work in the primary sector, if I get opportunities in the secondary sector, or I'm working with an organisation that wants to do something in an area that I'm not in, then I will introduce them to my colleagues in the relevant financial education charities. But so we're trying to form one voice around the importance of what's going on and respond to things as a group. But it's difficult to truly get much further than that because of the nature of the funding structures, honestly.
Yeah.
And the fact that everybody's fighting to survive, I suppose, ultimately.
Yeah, in a space that should arguably just be fundamentally funded. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Super interesting. So again, that comes back to our early conversation on government, right? And actually, we really need the public sector to step up.
Yes.
Ideally, to support this agenda. If we could just finish up on really what success means to you and what making it matter means to you in terms of living your purpose through the work you do.
For me, it's about every child having a crack at life and a fair start, a level playing field, I suppose. We just squander the potential of so many young people by writing them off and giving them less support just because of the postcode that they happen to be born into. And that is something I'm very passionate about. Who knows what some of these kids could have been in a different environment with a different set of support and a different set of opportunities. I know that that's not something we can fix overnight, but every step we take towards making that happen has got to be good for everybody in the country, I would say.
Yep. Thank you, Sarah. That was a great note to end on. Thank you. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been
Thank
great.
you. Nice to see you again.